My world that I want to have a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say I am what I am.
And welcome to a frozen east wall down here at Dublin City FM. You're going to be listening to a very special edition of lgBtq Live. I'm Mick Fitzgerald as usual, and today we're even going to call the as a tribute to the guests today, we're going to call it Bi-Zone, and that's why I'm delighted to introduce a couple of beastie boys as our guests today. First up we have Jennifer Aust. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you very much. Hello.
And the thespian himself, Mark Ball. Mark, again, welcome to lgBtq Live.
Thanks for having us, Mick.
Yeah. Mark, we'll come to the reason why you're here in a moment, and it's got a lot to do with Smock Alley and the 2018 Seen and Heard Festival of New York, New York. All I can say at the beginning is, are you getting ready for the best from the ace, as we say?
That's it.
Are you a fan of the snow, or like myself, do you prefer to watch it from indoors out the other way around?
I like the snow when I don't have to do anything. I cycle a lot and live very far away, so that kind of ruins everything for me usually.
Well, it changes it. And yourself, Jen, are you a bit of a snow woman?
Yeah, once again, when I don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
You know, it's nice to look at.
Yeah. So you've got a play that's starting this week, and if you had have been there, say, 2 weeks ago, the weather was good, there were packed houses. Are you concerned that somehow or other you might become a victim of the environment?
We might. I thought about it the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, fortunately, you're not playing till the end of the week.
Yeah.
So we're fingers crossed, as we said. As I announced at the beginning, Mark and Jen, the programme is going to be called Buy Everything this week, or even Buy Irish if you like, because you've got a play called Biconic that's playing at the at Smock Alley, as we said, later in the week. Let's get back to the topic of bi. What I was mentioning to you before we came on the air, I'm old enough to remember when there were no gay people in the world. There were either queers, which was the common expression in Ireland, but there were, around the early 70s, when David Bowie did Hunky Dory, suddenly people came out as bi, and then we had that whole glam era, and men wore makeup, and people said they outed themselves as bi, but there were no gay people. What I've seen since then is that it's almost reversed in itself, that we seem to have a lot of gay people now and very few bi people. Why do you think that is, Mark, based on your experience?
Well, it's the whole thing, I guess, like you said, that was the kind of a stepping stone. There's that phrase that I said to Jen at the start of it, was just bi now, gay later, which we kind of want to reclaim, bi now, bi later. I guess there's no representation.
Or like we've found now, like as young people, we have a lot of friends that are bisexual, but we're not encouraged to talk about it or be particularly out, or some people really don't like using the label, even though,
yeah, it's helpful, and it's
they
also
are attracted to more than one gender.
Comes into like legitimacy of being queer. I know I've been to a couple of prides, and some of my gay friends have said things, and I've been a bit like, that's a bit rude, or that's a bit blah, and they're like, oh, Mark, you can't say it, it's their day, it's not your day. Which it is, lgBtq.
Well, that's why I was emphasising today we are reclaiming the B, because the B has often been the most silent of all the parts of the acronym. Is that your experience, Jen? Because you usually in college, where both of you are at the moment, people are often quite happy to say, oh yes, I did this, I did that, or I was at a party the other night. Is that still the case, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like sometimes that means that people can think that the label isn't for them, or that the label means something that they don't want it to mean, but actually it can be a very inclusive label as well.
What's your experience, Mark? Are males more, shall we say, judgmental? I often assume that females are, oh yes, well, women have often a more mature attitude to sex, so they are likely to see something as experimental, they're likely to see it as a phase, they're even likely to see it as a genuine choice, whereas males, we're not really often that mature enough when it comes to sexuality, particularly in Ireland. What's your experience being in college, Mark?
I guess it actually comes from all sides. Jen and I have been talking about male bisexuality, female bisexuality, trans bisexuality. Like, it's really nuanced, you know. In some ways we were saying that it can sometimes be easier for women to come out, but actually the question is it easier for them to come out? Because the idea at the end of the day is, oh well, you're just getting with women because you know, it's fun, but like at the end of the day you're really going to want men, you know. So there's that kind of dual side to it.
About 2 or 3 years ago, I had people from Shout Out on this program, and they do the youth advice and all of that. And I was asking them who are likely, particularly at the teenage years, who are likely to be more judgmental, males or females? Now, I expected them to say males, but they said usually females are, and it can often be a lot more cutting in an all-female environment. How would you comment on that, Jim?
Yeah, well, I suppose from my experience, I've had a very positive experience in college with males and females about my sexuality. But in secondary school, I went to a boarding school, and I wouldn't have dreamed of coming out as bi when I was still there, because I would have gotten a lot of like harassment and a lot of harsh words.
Yeah, and did you go to a what we would call a day school, Mark, or your traditional school?
Yeah, I actually, funny enough, didn't come out either. I was in New Park, which is a very lovely liberal school, but the kind of, I guess, the flavour in the year, no one was out at the time. I know a few people are now after that, but I guess, yeah, again, it comes down to not having seen that as a way, you know, like we talk about it as well in the show of, like, you know, oh, I'm attracted to men and attracted to other genders, then does that just mean I'm gay? That's kind of a thing that you have to work out yourself.
Yeah, well, I suppose from my experience, I've had a very positive experience in college with males and females about my sexuality. But in secondary school, I went to a boarding school, and I wouldn't have dreamed of coming out as bi when I was still there, because I would have gotten a lot of like harassment and a lot of harsh words.
Yeah, and did you go to a what we would call a day school, Mark, or your traditional school?
Yeah, I actually, funny enough, didn't come out either. I was in New Park, which is a very lovely liberal school, but the kind of, I guess, the flavour in the year, no one was out at the time. I know a few people are now after that, but I guess, yeah, again, it comes down to not having seen that as a way, you know, like we talk about it as well in the show of, like, you know, oh, I'm attracted to men and attracted to other genders, then does that just mean I'm gay? That's kind of a thing that you have to work out yourself.
But in my day, defining yourself by a gender or defining yourself by a sexuality was almost unheard of, unless you were in showbiz. And so people generally didn't do it. Is there pressure on your generation, both as males and females, to define oneself in that one way or the other, whether it's bisexual, whether it's heterosexual, whether it's gay, whether it's trans, whether it's lesbian, or dare I say it, polyamorous and queer all thrown in?
Yeah.
Is it much more fluid these days, but at the same time prescriptive in that sense of the word, that you can't sit on the fence?
Yeah, it's interesting because there are so many labels now, and there's things like demisexual and aromantic and all these sort of words that there's a lot of words now, and people feel like they have to pick one. But also, I think I'm a big advocate for labels, because the label of bisexuality has always been one that is really useful for me.
And it's something we've talked in the show about, you know, enabling yourself and growing by being able to do that. So a lot of people kind of put it down to the 50-50 man and woman, whereas for us, which is something we're also trying to get across in the show, is that, like, well, my definition anyway is more than one gender to any different degree at any different time to me, which is just like, wow, you know, that's really freeing to be able to say whoever, whenever, you know.
Without getting too specific, if you could perhaps explain to me, and I'm very delighted if both of you want to try here. I'm still, despite doing this program, I'm not all that clear of what's the difference between bi, queer, polyamorous. How do you deal with that?
So or
does it even matter?
Well, that's another question altogether. Like, I would identify as a queer woman as well as being bisexual, and I think queer is a pretty big, like, encapsulating term, I think, around, like, sexuality and gender. But what was polyamorous? I think, like, polyamorous actually probably isn't really to do with most sexualities, which is kind of interesting. It's more of a lifestyle choice.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't be polyamorous.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mark, how do you feel about that? Are we getting into too many alphabet soups of sexuality, or do we not even have enough?
I don't know. Like, it depends. It's basically what suits the people at the end of the day, really, and what they want to use and what's most empowering for them. Like, I know that we've talked about sometimes bisexual isn't really used. It's kind of like the way feminist became quite a dirty word, and now we're reclaiming it. Like, part of our thing is we want to reclaim the word bisexual because it's been used. Like, people look at it, bi meaning two, being like, oh, that's very trans exclusionary and but that's a big thing in the show for us to be like, well, yes, bi means two, language changes, so bi meaning my gender, other genders.
If I refer to what used to be the in the public domain, the common how would I put it, the descriptions: Woody Allen, bisexuals, double your fun on a Saturday night. Fair enough, Woody. And then the other one, I think it was, if you you're probably a bit too young to be fans of Friends, but I think
not at all.
I think there was a song that Phoebe sang about various people, and at one stage she said, she was talking about bisexuals, and some people say they're fooling themselves. I sent you the speech by Aoife Fitzgibbon at last year's Dublin Pride, which I thought was the standout speech of the communities. How did you feel when you heard that? Did you find it empowering? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I thought it was a great speech, and I really believed a lot of it. And I also I was very touched by the statistic that she mentioned, and that that queer struggles and queer mental health struggles really also apply to bi people too.
To put to yourself, Marcus, is that two of the things she said I thought were very important is, I'm not confused. This is a choice that I have made, and therefore respect my choice. The other bit, and this is a very, very interesting one that most people, particularly in the lgBtq community, tend to overlook. 70% of that community is bisexual. It is not gay or lesbian. Now, as you seem to be saying in the play, screaming out for recognition.
Yeah, I guess like our big thing is there's no representation of it, and it's great that she uses the word confused throughout the whole speech to kind of subvert that stereotype. I know we're using in the show a lot. We're using a lot of stereotype and trying to one, subvert it, but also to question a queer dialogue. We kind of have that. There's a kind of conversation around queerness. Like, we've got marriage equality. We've got there. It's all okay, but like, what about all the rights for trans people, and obviously race and class is still a huge thing in Dublin that we don't talk about. So although we're not solely focusing all those issues, they're still really important to us as well, because the community, there's still lots of work to be done in the community.
Indeed. We've talked about how from an internal perspective outwards. How did you find it, and how do you find it when you get to deal with your peers? Are they automatically understanding, or are some of them dismissive, or others judgmental? What is the perspective out there now?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I think generally it's pretty accepting, but there's also this kind of underlying assumption that like you don't need to talk about it that much. It's like acceptance, but it's not encouragement to be open about the experience. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Do you get people coming up to you and being a bit more, how can I put it, deep and meaningful after they've had a few drinks?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
What about yourself, Mark? A good-looking chap like yourself.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think like Jen and I have a very similar community of friends, and they're generally quite accepting. Yeah, I guess it's quite good, but then we're in a very, very small bubble of that, and like I still will get weird things said to me all the time about threesomes and having more sex. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's not true. People are still difficult. It's
I know.
Life's still hard.
Life is still a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I tell you, I grew up in an era when everything was illegal. It was illegal to be gay. You couldn't get a divorce. You could get locked up for possession of condoms. I mean, it was a fabulous world to grow up in. So, I say to people, I was a hippie. That uncovered an entire mass of unacceptables.
Yeah.
So about 7 or 8 years ago, I was in another radio station. And I was talking to somebody in the canteen, and for whatever reason or other, because we were talking about gay and all of that. And he turns around to me and said, "You never did that, did you?" And I said, "Of course I did. Of course, I mean, I grew up in that era when we tried all sorts of things." The reaction really surprised me, because this was a guy who would have been in his mid to late 50s. He immediately ran into the office, a crowded office, and said, "Did you know about him?" And it was like, I was outed by, without ever even intending it. And I was a bit surprised in the sense, because this was a guy who grew up in the same era as me, but yet it seemed to be shocking that it was somebody he knew. You could be out there and you could be gay and you could be all of this, but the fact that I was who I was, he just didn't seem to be able to grasp that. And it was like he became the town crier. And I just wonder, has that era passed for you guys?
And I don't know, like, I don't feel like I've ever been outed by people in that way, but I actually do feel an onus, because I know a lot of my friends find it hard to accept that. Like, there's a huge thing of having to be like 50-50 or blah blah blah, and not being able to claim the label. So I feel like I have to be an advocate for that. So in a way, it's kind of inverted. I don't know about Jen, but like, I try to talk about it as much as possible.
The personal is definitely like political for me as well when it comes to my sexuality.
Slap me down if I put my big foot in it and say, how about parents? First of all, would they be aware, and how would they have responded had you have mentioned it to them?
Yeah, so my mother, I've mentioned it to her twice that I'm bi, and it's never mentioned. The second time I said it to her, she was like, "Oh, you never told me that the first time," and I said, "Oh, I did."
Yeah, but I don't want to know about it.
She doesn't want to know about it. So I kind of let that lie.
Yeah. And have you experienced any? Shall we say moments of discomfort, Mark, in this?
No, I mean, similar to Jen, we don't talk about it that much. My parents kind of ignore it. Well, you see, I did come out to them in a fight, which isn't always the best way to do it. Now, there is a bit of my coming out story in the show. If you come see, you'll be able to see how nuanced. So it was, it was tricky, but there's also some nice things in there. Like, my parents come from very different, like a little bit more closed when it comes to like talking about things.
All parents do if it's any concern.
So like they tried, you know what I mean? It's that kind of thing of they don't want to rock the boat by talking about it too much, but they also don't want to not talk about it, so it won't be talked about for months, and then there'll be a weird comment made to try and accept me, but it's all out of love, that kind of way.
Now, one of the issues that you're raising in the play, Mark, and I think this is very, very interesting, is to say there's virtually no representation, because there's no role models out there in that sense. Historically, there's a lot of gay, bisexual people out there, a whole stack of them, but not that many new ones. The new ones would be all gay or lesbian or so on and so forth. Something I briefly mentioned in that sense is that I'm not aware of anybody being made the Grand Marshal of Dublin Pride to represent a bisexual community. Now, people said, "Oh yes, there have been bisexuals," but nobody was made the Grand Marshal simply because they were gay, simply because they were bisexual. Now, a lot of people have been because they were trans or gay or TV, you name it. Do you think it's time to redress that injustice?
Yeah, definitely. Maybe that's part of the show, heading the road to Pride.
Well, last year, as I say, it was the first time I've ever seen that Bi Ireland got to speak among the community speakers. Just one more nudge, and perhaps they could be there in the lead float this year.
Definitely, that'd be great.
Yeah, because I was with Tenny when 6 years ago, and Tenny were marching 6 years ago. 5 years ago, Tenny led the parade. Tenny took off from that, and often I think that's really what's needed. So tell us, we came here to talk about theatre. Biconic, you're the writer, Mark. What's the genesis of the idea?
Well, I kind of approached Jen. Jen and I are kind of co-writing it together and devising. So Jen's directing it and I'm performing in it.
We just wanted, at the beginning, like a big bi play. And then kind of distilled it from there.
Yeah, I guess I was kind of sick of particularly going to see shows where there'd be a bi character just about there, and then they'd give the line of, "Oh, oh, I may be in love with this woman, but I guess I'm just really gay. And then, I'm kind of just sick of seeing that.
Yeah.
And we wanted to bring in some of the stuff we're all about, which is kind of like fun, performative things. Also kind of reclaiming queer culture in a way, like it's quite cabaret and clowny, and we draw on pop culture. Which is quite a queer thing, and bisexuals are quite often left out of that queer dialogue, so it's nice to be able to reclaim some of that culture within our own lens.
Yeah.
You're the director, Jen.
Yes, I am.
Is he an easy actor to direct?
He is, yeah. No, we have good fun. As long as we have to get down to business, but yeah, it's good. It's a good process.
Have you got any plans now? We're on the show here. We are very good friends with Brian Merriman. Now, Brian runs the Gay Theatre Festival. I know that's got a definitive, but any plans to submit it to this year's Gay Theatre Festival? Because it seems to me ideal fare, and that'd be a great place for it.
Yeah, we've definitely thought about it. I don't know if we're going to submit for this year because we kind of want to see what the reception is like.
Already passed as well.
Yeah.
But I also think, it's worth questioning. Like when I see the posters go up, I get very upset because Oscar Wilde is one of my bicons.
Of course.
And I guess it's interesting. It's maybe a question to put to him. Is it time to change the name from gay to queer and open it up? For the whole dialogue? Because something which is Jen and I would reflect on is there's a whole notion of there's articles being shared by gay clubs and bars that are going, all these straight people are coming into our bars, but you've also got to question the thought behind that. Is that bisexual couples coming in with their heterosexual notions or whatever, but also trans people who are passing and non-binary people. You're kind of putting a label on queerness,
Although I'm not as regular a reader of it as I used to be, what are things like GCN? I've never really seen it as being a hugely presentation platform for bi ideas or bi culture. What's your thoughts on that one, Mark?
I'm not too sure. I'm not that well read. I usually get most of my bi culture and writing from Bi Ireland, and there's another great one called Bi.org that shares lots of articles. So I'm actually not a reader of GCN. Do you?
I actually haven't read that much of it either, come to think of it. Maybe we should.
How do you find in general that media represents the idea of bi-ness anymore? Is it I've seen on a couple of soaps where over the last few weeks where people are being outed as either this or that or the other, but it's all gratuitous, and it's often it's presented as opportunistic. What I'm seeing is that bisexuality is it's often portrayed as not organic, in the sense that it's usually after a few drinks, or
very hypersexual sometimes.
Absolutely, in that sense. What's your view on that, Jen? Do you pay attention when you see these representations, because they're not that many anyway?
No, absolutely, and it's kind of reached a point in my life where I really try and seek representations in other places other than traditional media. But they're not as full or complex as they could be, and it's kind of a thing for a storyline as opposed to how the way a character is themselves.
Mark, let's get down to what we would call the bums on seats issue. You're playing this coming Thursday and Friday. What's that? Is that the first?
The first and the second.
First and the second, and it's in the main. It's in the main theatre in Smoke Alley. It's just yourself on stage?
Just myself performing. We have a couple of recorded sounds and some AV, but just myself.
You won't be bringing people out of the audience like I had last Monday.
No, we'll be looking people in the eye and that kind of thing, but we won't
be asking someone a few questions. But apart from that,
and for anybody who's concerned, I mean, you're not out there to convert them. In other words, if you go in there, the chances are you might even come out the same as you went in.
Oh, absolutely.
That we still haven't discovered a bi gene yet.
You won't catch the bi.
We try to have a bit of fun and tell the story and question things. It's kind of our main goal.
This year and last year, I went to see two plays by the same woman, who is, a self-declared a lesbian young woman. And I would have said those two plays had a very female-friendly audience. I would expect an audience for Biconic would be quite a diverse audience. not only in terms of genders, but also in terms of age. What's the feedback you're getting on that? It seems to be very well received so far, what I'm hearing.
Yeah. It's kind of, I'm looking forward to a diverse audience. We did a little snippet of it at a queer cabaret a few months ago, and we kind of found that it was kind of like the younger and the more like femme audience members were very into it. But we're excited for kind of everyone to see it and see what they think.
Yeah, and Mark, you were saying you do some drama teaching, and let's be honest, we would like to encourage young people to get into drama wherever they are, or whoever they are. Just tell us a little bit about where you're doing that and how people might even get to follow it up.
Yeah, I teach in two different places. So I co-run Cavantila Youth Theatre, which is based in St Angela's Hall, and recruitment's kind of every September from 12 to 20-year-olds. And then I also teach in the National Performing Arts School, which is based in the Lear on Pearse Street. And there's all sorts of dancing and drama, but I just teach drama and that.
And do you need any product placement yourself, Jen?
No, not particularly.
Yeah.
Jen is a wonderful director, stage manager, production manager, all-round wonderful person. Hire her.
And not only that, she will soon be a Trinity College graduate and will be available there for interviews.
Yes, exactly.
Look, the important thing is Biconic. It's going to be playing this coming Thursday and Friday at Smoke Alley, 9:30, I believe, every night.
Yeah.
And it runs for 2 nights. Don't miss it. I won't be.
Thank you.
World that I want to have a little pride in, my world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say